My father taught me two things: how to fix a broken engine and how to spot a liar. My Uncle Richard was both. He broke our family, then smiled at the funeral. I have been collecting the pieces ever since. Now I will show him what broken really looks like. I will always remember the day my father didn't come home. I was 12 years old, sitting on the front porch of our small house in Ohio, swinging my legs against the wooden steps. The sun had gone down hours ago, and the streetlights made everything look orange and lonely. My mother stood by the door with her arms crossed, her face tight like she was trying to hold something inside. She kept saying, "He is just late, Maya. You know your dad. He gets caught up helping people." But I knew better. Even at 12, I knew. My father, Samuel Whitmore, was not the kind of man who got caught up. He was the kind of man who called every hour if he was going to be 5 minutes late. He was the kind of man who wrote little notes on napkins and left them in my lunchbox. He was the kind of man who loved us so loudly that the whole neighborhood could hear him laughing from our kitchen. So when the phone rang at 11:15 at night and my mother's face turned from pale to gray, I knew our world had cracked open. A truck, a drunk driver, a highway 60 miles away. They said he died instantly. They said he did not feel pain. People say those things to make you feel better, but they do not work, because the pain was not his. It was ours. It was mine. I am Maya Whitmore. I am 28 years old now, and for the last 16 years, I have been trying to understand why the people we loved the most became the ones who destroyed us. Let me start from the beginning. Or maybe from the end of everything we thought was safe. My father was not a rich man by any normal standard. He worked as a mechanic. He owned a small garage called Whitmore Auto on the south side of town. He had grease under his fingernails and a laugh that sounded like rocks tumbling in a dryer. Our house was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a backyard with a fence that leaned to the left. But my father had something that no one else in our family had. He had a secret. I learned about it 3 days after his funeral. The funeral was a sad, rainy affair. People brought casseroles and potato salads. They hugged my mother too long and patted my head like I was a dog. My younger brother, Leo, who was only 7 at the time, kept asking when Daddy was coming back. I stopped answering after the 10th time. On the 3rd day, my mother sat me down at the kitchen table. She looked older than I remembered. The lines around her eyes had deepened overnight. "Maya," she said, "your father had a life insurance policy, and he had some savings. But there is something else." She slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a letter, handwritten in my father's messy script. "Dear Maya and Leo, if you are reading this, I am sorry I could not be there to say it in person. But I need you to know something. Years ago, before you were born, my father left me a piece of land up north, near the lake. It is not much to look at now, but it is the only thing of real value I own. One day, that land might save you. Do not let anyone take it from you, not family, not friends. It is yours, both of you. I love you more than all the stars. Dad." I read the letter 3 times. Then I looked at my mother. "What land?" "I have never heard of any land." My mother shrugged, but her eyes were wet. "He never talked about it. I think it was complicated. His father, your grandfather, he was not an easy man. They had a falling out, but your father kept the deed. He kept it hidden." "Where is it now?" I asked. "I do not know," she said. "I looked everywhere. The garage, his closet, the shed, I cannot find it." That was the first time I felt it. A cold little whisper in my chest. Something was wrong. Something had been taken before we even knew it existed. 2 weeks later, my Uncle Richard came to visit. Richard was my father's older brother. He lived in Chicago, wore expensive suits, and always smelled like peppermint and leather. At the funeral, he had stood in the back, not crying, just watching, like he was counting the number of people who showed up, like he was taking inventory. Now he sat on our worn-out couch, crossing one leg over the other, and smiled at my mother with teeth that were too white. "Elena," he said, "I know this is hard, but we need to talk about Sam's estate." My mother frowned. "Estate?" Sam did not have an estate. He had a garage and a truck that did not run half the time. Richard chuckled. "Oh, I think he had a little more than that. Did he ever mention some property? Up north?" The room went cold. I saw my mother's hand tighten on her coffee cup. "I do not know what you are talking about," she said. Richard leaned forward. "Elena, I am trying to help you. That property is actually part of a larger family trust. My father, God rest his soul, set it up years ago. Sam never told you because Sam and I had a different understanding of how things should be divided. I did not understand all the words then, but I understood his face. His face was the face of a man who had already won something and was just waiting for us to hand him the trophy. You need to sign some papers, Richard said, pulling out a folder from his briefcase, just to clear things up. The bank needs them, so the property can be properly managed. My mother looked at the papers, then she looked at me. I shook my head. I did not know why, I just knew. Something in my bones told me not to trust the man with the peppermint breath. I will have my lawyer look at them, my mother said. Richard's smile flickered. Just for a second, but I saw it. A crack in the mask. Of course, he said. Take your time, but do not take too long. These things have deadlines. He left. And my mother burned the papers in the backyard barbecue that night, but Richard did not give up. Over the next few months, he sent letters. He sent emails. He sent other relatives to our door. Aunts I had never met. Cousins who suddenly wanted to check in on us. They all said the same thing. That property was not really my father's. It was the family's. My father had just been holding it, and now that he was gone, it needed to go back to the family. My mother fought. God, did she fight. She got a lawyer, a tired old man named Mr. Holloway who smelled like coffee and defeat. He took her money and filed papers and went to court, but Richard had better lawyers. Richard had money. Richard had time. And my mother had grief and 2 children and a garage that was slowly losing customers because the mechanic was dead. I remember one night, about 6 months after the funeral. I woke up at 2 in the morning because I heard my mother crying in the bathroom. I stood outside the door and listened. She was whispering to herself. She was saying, "Sam, I am sorry. I am so sorry. I cannot do this without you." I did not go in. I was 12. I did not know how to comfort a mother who had lost the love of her life. So I just sat against the wall outside the bathroom door until her crying stopped. Then I went back to bed and stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. That was the year everything changed. Not just because my father died, but because the man who was supposed to be our family showed us exactly what family meant to him. Within a year, the court ruled. The property belonged to the family trust, and the family trust was controlled by Richard. We never saw the land. We never knew its worth. But years later, I would learn that it was over 200 acres on a lake that was being developed into vacation homes. It was worth millions, millions, and my father had left it to us. And Richard had stolen it, but that was only the beginning, because Richard did not just want the land, he wanted everything. He wanted the garage. He wanted the house. He wanted my father's tools, his photos, his memories. He wanted to erase us. The year after my father died, my mother started getting sick. Little things at first, headaches, tiredness, then bigger things, she could not keep food down. She lost weight, the doctors ran tests, they said it was stress. They said she needed rest, but she could not rest because Richard was still coming. He had filed another motion, something about back taxes on the property. He said my mother owed the family trust money. He said if she did not pay, she could lose the house. I watched my mother fight for 2 more years. I watched her sell my father's truck. I watched her take a second job at a grocery store, bagging groceries at night while Leo and I stayed with a neighbor. I watched her hands get rough and her eyes get empty. There is a moment I will never forget. It was a cold night in November. My mother came home from her second job at 11 o'clock. She sat down at the kitchen table and put her head in her hands. Leo was already asleep. I was pretending to do homework. "Mama," I said. "Are you okay?" She looked at me. For a second, she looked like she was going to lie. Then she said, "Maya, I am so tired. I am tired of fighting. I am tired of being afraid. I am tired of missing your father." I did not know what to say. So I got up and made her a cup of tea, the way my father used to make it, with too much sugar and a drop of milk. She drank it and smiled a little. That smile broke my heart more than her crying. Then on a Tuesday morning in April, she did not wake up. I was 15, Leo was 10, I found her. I went into her room to ask for lunch money and she was just lying there. Her eyes were closed. Her hands were folded on her chest like she was praying. For a second, I thought she was sleeping. Then I touched her arm and it was cold. I screamed so loud that the neighbor called the police. The doctors said it was her heart. They said the stress had worn it out, but I knew the truth. Richard had killed her, not with a truck on a highway, but with papers, with court dates, with the slow, patient poison of stealing everything a person has until there is nothing left to live for. At the funeral, there were only 6 people. Me, Leo, the neighbor who called the police, a woman from my mother's work, and 2 ladies from church. Richard did not come. He sent flowers. White lilies. My mother hated white lilies. I threw them in the trash. After the funeral, social services came. They said we could not stay in the house alone. They said we had no living relatives who could take us. I told them about Richard. I said he was our uncle. I said he had money. I said he could take us. The social worker called Richard. I stood in the kitchen and listened to her side of the conversation. Yes, sir, I understand. But they are your niece and nephew. Yes, sir, I see. No, sir. I will tell them. She hung up and looked at me with pity in her eyes. Pity was the worst thing. I hated pity even more than I hated white lilies. I am sorry, Maya, she said. Your uncle says he cannot take you. He says he travels too much for work. He says it would not be fair to you. He is lying, I said. He is lying and he is a thief. The social worker did not say anything. She just wrote something on her clipboard and told me to pack a bag. So Leo and I went into foster care. Separate homes. The system said it was temporary. The system said they would try to keep us together. The system lied. Leo went to a family on the other side of the city. A family with 5 other kids and a father who drank whiskey from a coffee mug. I went to a woman named Carol who had a boyfriend named Donnie who looked at me in a way that made my skin crawl. For 3 years, I did not see Leo except on supervised visits. Once a month, 2 hours, in a gray room with a social worker sitting in the corner reading a magazine. Leo would come in looking thinner each time. He stopped smiling after the first year. I wrote letters to Richard every week. I sent them to his office in Chicago. I asked him why. I asked him to give us back what was ours. I asked him to help us. I told him about Carol. I told him about Donnie. I told him I was scared. He never wrote back. But one day, I got a letter returned to me. On the envelope, someone had written in red ink, "Deceased, returned to sender." Richard was not dead. He had just moved. He had taken the land, sold it, and disappeared like smoke. I was 16 when Donnie tried to come into my room at night. I had been expecting it. I kept a pair of scissors under my pillow. When the door opened, I sat up and held them out in front of me. I did not say anything. I just looked at him. He looked at the scissors. Then he looked at me. He said, "You are crazy, just like your mother." He left. I did not sleep for 3 days. I called the social worker the next morning. I told her everything. She moved me to a different home that same day. A group home with 8 other girls and a house mother named Ruth who was old and tired but kind. Ruth taught me how to cook. She taught me how to sew. She taught me that being angry did not mean I was broken. She said, "Maya, you have fire in you. Do not let anyone put it out." I stayed with Ruth until I turned 18. On my birthday, she gave me a bus pass and $100. She said, "Go make something of yourself, and do not look back." I took the bus to the library, and I started researching. I found out that the lake property had been sold for $4.2 million. The money had gone into a trust under Richard's name. Then the trust had been dissolved. Then Richard had bought a house in Florida. Then he had bought a boat. Then he had married a woman named Patricia who had 2 children of her own. He had built a new life on top of the ruins of mine. I worked 3 jobs for the next 7 years. I cleaned hotel rooms. I waited tables. I stocked shelves at a warehouse at night. I saved every penny. I lived in a studio apartment with a leaking ceiling and a mouse that I named Richard. I would talk to the mouse. I would say, "Richard, you stole everything from me, but I am still here." I went to school at night, 1 class at a time. Math, English, accounting, law. I got a degree in accounting when I was 25. Then I got a job at a small firm in Cleveland. It was not glamorous, but it was mine. And I never stopped thinking about Richard. When I was 25, I found Leo. He was living in Detroit, working at a tire shop. He looked like our father. Same jaw, same hands, but his eyes were different. They were hard, angry, sad. I took a bus to Detroit on a rainy Saturday. I had his address from a private investigator I hired with my savings. The tire shop was on a corner with broken sidewalks and a gas station that had been boarded up for years. Leo was underneath a car when I walked in. All I could see were his boots. I stood there for a minute, just looking at those boots. They were the same kind of boots our father used to wear. "Leo," I said. He slid out from under the car. He looked at me. For a second, he did not recognize me, then his face changed. His lips started to tremble. "Maya," he said. "Yeah, Leo, it is me." He stood up. He was taller than me now, a lot taller. He had a scar on his chin that was not there when we were kids. His hands were covered in grease, just like our father's. We stood there for a long time, then he hugged me. He hugged me so tight I could not breathe, and he cried. He cried like a little boy. He cried like the 10-year-old who had been taken away from his sister and thrown into a nightmare. I cried too. We stood in that tire shop in Detroit, two orphans covered in grease and tears, and we held each other like we were the only two people left in the world. We sat in a diner for 6 hours. He told me about his foster family, how they had locked him in the basement when he misbehaved, how the father had beaten him with a belt, how the mother had looked the other way, how he had run away at 16, how he had lived on the streets, how he had slept in doorways and behind dumpsters, how he had been arrested twice for small things, stealing food, sleeping in a park, things he did not do but could not fight because he had no money and no one to speak for him. I told him about Richard, about the land, about the millions, about our father's letter, about Mr. Holloway, about the box that would come later, about the evidence I had been gathering for years. Leo listened. He ate 3 plates of pancakes while he listened. When I finished, he put his fork down and put his head in his hands. His shoulders shook. But he did not make a sound. "I want to kill him," Leo said finally. "No," I said, "I want him to feel what we felt. That was 3 years ago. Now I am 28. Leo is 23, and we are ready." This is the part of the story where I tell you what we did. But you have to understand, we did not become bad people. We became something else. We became hunters. Richard had no idea we were coming. He thought we were dead, probably. 2 orphaned kids from Ohio. Forgotten, invisible. He lived in a gated community in Naples, Florida. He drove a Mercedes. He played golf every Tuesday. His wife, Patricia, posted pictures of their vacations on social media. Paris, Rome, the Maldives, every picture was a knife in my chest. But here is what Richard did not know. The land he stole was not just land. My father had kept something else hidden, not on the property, but in the paperwork. The deed had a clause that only someone who had read the original document would know. My father's lawyer, Mr. Holloway, had retired years ago, but before he died, he left a box for me. He had tracked me down through the foster care system. The box arrived at my apartment when I was 22. Inside was a copy of the original deed, and a letter from Mr. Holloway. "Maya," he wrote, "your father was not a fool. He knew his brother. He gave me this deed for safekeeping before he died." The clause on page 7 states that if the property is transferred through fraud or coercion, the rightful heirs can reclaim it at any time. No statute of limitations. No exceptions. You have to prove the fraud, but the law is on your side. I am sorry I could not do more when you were young. I was old and tired. But you are not. Fight. I held that letter and cried for an hour. Then I called Leo. We spent the next year gathering evidence. Richard was careful, but he was also arrogant. He had bragged about the land to his friends. He had told a woman at a cocktail party my brother was a mechanic. He did not know what he had. I saved that land from being wasted. We found that woman. Her name was Diane. She lived in Chicago. She remembered the conversation because Richard had been drunk and loud. She was a retired schoolteacher with no reason to lie. She agreed to testify. We found the bank manager who had processed the sale of the property. His name was Mr. Vance. He remembered Richard coming in alone, without my mother's signature, without our signatures. He said Richard had presented a document that looked like a power of attorney, but my mother had never signed a power of attorney. Mr. Vance was old now. He used a cane, but he had kept a copy of that document in his personal files because something about it had felt wrong. "I will testify," he said. "I have been waiting 20 years to tell the truth about that man." We found a cousin, Margaret, who had been at the family meeting when Richard told everyone the land belonged to the trust. She had thought it was wrong at the time, but she had been afraid to speak up. She was not afraid anymore. She had cancer now. She said she wanted to clear her conscience before she died. "I am sorry, Maya," she said. "I am so sorry. I should have said something then. I should have protected you. You can protect us now," I said. She nodded, and she cried. Piece by piece, we built our case. But we did not just want the land back. We wanted Richard to suffer. We wanted him to lose everything, the way we had lost everything. So Leo and I came up with a plan. Leo got a job at Richard's golf club. He worked as a caddy. He was quiet, polite, invisible. He listened to Richard's conversations. He learned his routines. He found out that Richard had invested most of the stolen money in a real estate development company. A company that was, coincidentally, committing tax fraud. Leo overheard Richard talking to his partner on the golf course. He was standing behind a tree, pretending to look for a lost ball. He heard the partner say, "If the IRS ever looks at this, we are done." And Richard laughed. Richard said, "The IRS does not look at people like us. We are too small for them. We are not the big fish." Leo pulled out his phone. He pressed record. He kept it in his pocket for the rest of the conversation. That was the first piece. The second piece came from Patricia, Richard's wife. She was not a bad person. She just loved a bad man. I reached out to her anonymously. I sent her a letter. I told her that her husband had stolen money from 2 orphans. I told her that the money had paid for her house, her boat, her trips. I told her that the orphans were now adults and they were tired of being invisible. I did not expect her to believe me, but she did. Or maybe she had always suspected. She reached out to me through a fake email account. She said she wanted to help. Why? I asked her. Because she said, "I have 2 children. And if someone did to them what Richard did to you, I would want someone to help." She sent me bank records. She sent me emails between Richard and his business partner. She sent me photos of documents showing that Richard had forged my mother's signature on the power of attorney. She sent me the key to the cage. I took everything to a lawyer, not Mr. Holloway. He was gone. But a young woman named Kendra, who had fire in her eyes and no fear of rich men. Kendra was from the south side of Chicago. She had grown up poor. She had watched her own family get cheated by a landlord. She became a lawyer to fight people like Richard. She looked at the evidence. She read the deed. She listened to Leo's recording. She smiled. "This is enough," she said. "This is more than enough. We are going to destroy him." We filed a lawsuit. We filed it quietly. No press. No social media. Just a legal document delivered to Richard's house on a Wednesday afternoon. He did not even know it was us. The plaintiffs were listed as Maya Whitmore and Leo Whitmore as heirs of Samuel Whitmore. Richard tried to settle. He offered us $100,000. We said no. He offered $500,000. We said no. He offered $1 million. We said no. He sent a message through his lawyer. "What do you want?" I sent a message back. "I want the truth." He offered $2 million. We said no. He called Kendra directly. I heard the conversation because Kendra put him on speakerphone. "Listen," he said, "those kids are being unreasonable. I am trying to be generous here. They never even saw that land. It does not mean anything to them." Kendra looked at me. I nodded. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, "Maya and Leo are not being unreasonable. They are being patient. There is a difference." She hung up. We wanted the trial. We wanted to stand in front of a judge and tell the story. We wanted the world to hear it. The trial was in Chicago 6 months later. Richard showed up in a $3,000 suit. He had a team of lawyers, 3 of them, young, sharp, expensive. They looked like they had never missed a meal in their lives. Richard looked confident. He looked like a man who had never lost anything in his life. Then he saw me. I walked into the courtroom in a plain blue dress. No makeup. My hair pulled back. I looked like my father's daughter. I looked like the girl from the small house in Ohio. Leo walked beside me. He had cleaned up. He wore a suit that did not quite fit because he had never owned one before. But he stood tall. He stood like our father would have stood. Richard's face went pale. He recognized us. Not because he had seen us recently, but because we looked like Sam. We looked like the brother he had betrayed. The courtroom was small, wooden benches, a high ceiling. A judge named Carter who had been on the bench for 22 years. He had seen everything, but I do not think he had seen anything like this. The trial lasted 2 weeks. I testified for 2 days. I sat in the witness box and looked directly at Richard the whole time. I did not look at the jury. I did not look at the judge. I looked at the man who had destroyed my family. I told the jury about the letter, about the land, about my mother burning the papers in the barbecue, about her sickness, about her death, about the funeral with only 6 people, about foster care, about Carol and Donnie, about the scissors under my pillow, about Leo being beaten, about the streets, about the 3 jobs, about the night classes, about the mouse I named Richard, about the box from Mr. Holloway. I did not cry. I wanted to. But I did not, because crying was what Richard wanted. He wanted us to look weak. He wanted the jury to see us as emotional, broken children. But we were not children anymore. When I finished, Richard's lawyer stood up. He was a thin man with glasses and a voice like oil. He said, "Miss Whitmore, is it true that you have not seen your brother for many years?" "Yes," I said. "Is it true that you do not know exactly what happened to him during those years?" "I know enough," I said. "Objection," Kendra said. "Speculation." "Sustained," the judge said. The lawyer tried again. "Miss Whitmore, is it possible that your memory of these events is influenced by grief, by anger, by the passage of time?" I looked at him. I said, "My mother died because of what your client did. My brother was beaten because of what your client did. I slept with a pair of scissors under my pillow because of what your client did. My memory is just fine. The question is whether your client's conscience is fine, and I think we both know the answer to that." The courtroom went silent. The lawyer sat down. Leo testified next. His voice cracked a few times. He talked about the night he ran away from his foster home, how he had walked 12 miles in the snow because he could not feel anything anymore, how his feet had bled, how he had knocked on a stranger's door and asked for help, how the stranger had called the police instead. He talked about living in an abandoned car, how he had slept on the back seat with a blanket made of old newspapers, how he had eaten from dumpsters behind restaurants, how he had stolen bread from a grocery store because he was so hungry he could not see straight. He talked about the first time he was arrested for stealing that bread, how the police had been rough with him, how they had called him a troublemaker, how no one had asked him why he was hungry. "I was hungry," Leo said, "and my uncle was rich, and that did not seem fair." The jury looked at Richard. Richard looked at the table. Richard's lawyer tried to cross-examine Leo. He asked, "Mr. Whitmore, you have a criminal record, do you not?" "Yes," Leo said. "For theft." "Yes. So you are a thief." "Objection," Kendra said. "Overruled," the judge said. Leo looked at the lawyer. He said, "I stole bread because I was starving. Your client stole $4 million because he was greedy. Tell me which one is worse." The lawyer had no answer. Patricia testified. She walked into the courtroom in a simple black dress. She looked smaller than she did in her vacation photos. She looked tired. She told the court how she had found the forged documents in Richard's safe, how she had confronted him, how he had laughed and said they were nobodies. They do not matter. The word hung in the air. Nobodies. She talked about how she had started paying attention after that, how she had found more documents, how she had realized that the house in Florida, the boat, the trips, all of it was built on stolen money. "I asked him once," she said. "I asked him if he ever felt bad about what he did to Sam's children. And he said Sam should have been smarter. He should have protected his own kids." The jury shifted in their seats. Richard's lawyer tried to attack Patricia. He said, "Mrs. Whitmore, you are in the middle of a divorce, are you not?" "Yes," she said. "And you are asking for a large settlement in that divorce, are you not?" "Yes. So you have a financial interest in seeing your husband lose this case." Patricia looked at him. She said, "I have a moral interest in seeing the truth come out. The money does not matter to me. What matters is that those 2 kids get justice. They lost their parents. They lost their childhood. They lost everything. And my husband played golf." She got off the stand and walked past Richard without looking at him. Diane testified, the woman from the cocktail party. She was 72 years old. She wore a flowered dress and glasses on a chain. She said, "Richard told me that his brother was a mechanic who did not know the value of the land. He said he had saved the property from being wasted on a family that would not appreciate it." Those were his exact words. I remember because I thought it was cruel. Mr. Vance testified, the old bank manager. He used his cane to walk to the stand. He held up the copy of the forged power of attorney. He said, "This signature is not Alina Whitmore's. I have seen her signature on other documents. This is a forgery." Richard's lawyer objected. He said Mr. Vance was not a handwriting expert. The judge overruled. He said, "The witness may testify to his opinion based on his experience." Mr. Vance said, "I have been a bank manager for 40 years. I have seen thousands of signatures. This one is fake." Margaret testified, our cousin. She was thin and pale from the cancer treatments, but her voice was strong. She said, Richard told the whole family that the land belonged to the trust. He said Sam had no right to it, but that was a lie. I knew it was a lie, I just did not say anything, and I have regretted it every day for 20 years. She looked at Richard. She said, You are a bad man, Richard. And I am sorry I ever called you family. Richard's face was red. He whispered something to his lawyer. His lawyer whispered back. Then came the recording. Kendra played Leo's recording for the court. The voice on the recording was Richard's, clear as day. The IRS does not look at people like us. We are too small for them. We are not the big fish. Then his partner said, If the IRS ever looks at this, we are done. And Richard laughed. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the clock on the wall ticking. The judge looked at Richard. The jury looked at Richard. Richard looked at his hands. After 2 weeks, the case went to the jury. We waited in a small room near the courthouse. Leo paced back and forth. Kendra sat in a corner reading a book. I sat by the window and watched the traffic. Leo said, What if they do not believe us? They believe us, I said. How do you know? Because the truth is on our side, and the truth always comes out. It just takes time. The jury took 3 hours. 3 hours is not a long time for a case this complex. Kendra told us that meant they had made up their minds quickly. When the bailiff called us back into the courtroom, my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Leo grabbed my hand. His palm was sweaty. Richard sat at his table. His face was gray. His $3,000 suit looked like a costume now. He looked like a man who was finally understanding that he was not untouchable. The judge said, Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman stood up. He was a middle-aged man with a beard and kind eyes. He looked at me. Then he looked at Richard. Yes, Your Honor, he said. We have. He handed a piece of paper to the bailiff. The bailiff gave it to the judge. The judge read it. His face did not change. He said, on the charge of fraud, we the jury find the defendant, Richard Whitmore, liable. On the charge of coercion, we find the defendant liable. On the charge of undue influence, we find the defendant liable. Leo squeezed my hand so hard I thought my fingers would break. The judge continued. The property rights are hereby restored to the rightful heirs, Maya Whitmore and Leo Whitmore. Additionally, the defendant is ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $7.3 million. This includes the value of the land, the value of the family home, the value of the garage, medical expenses for Alina Whitmore, emotional damages for both plaintiffs, and legal fees. Richard stood up. His chair scraped against the floor. He said, This is ridiculous. This is not justice. Those kids are nothing. They are nobody. The judge banged his gavel. Sit down, Mr. Whitmore, or I will hold you in contempt. Richard sat down, but he was shaking. His lawyer put a hand on his arm. Richard pushed it away. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had stolen my father's land, who had driven my mother to an early grave, who had left me and Leo to rot in foster care. I looked at him and felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just a deep, quiet stillness, like a lake after the wind stops blowing. Leo leaned over to me. He whispered, Dad would be proud. I nodded. I could not speak. But that was not the end, because the IRS had been watching the trial, and they had heard Leo's recording, and they had their own case. 6 weeks later, federal agents showed up at Richard's house in Florida. They arrested him at 7 in the morning. Patricia watched from the doorway. She did not cry. She just closed the door and called her lawyer. Richard was indicted for tax fraud. His business partner turned on him to save himself. The partner gave the IRS everything: bank records, emails, testimony. Richard went to trial again. This time there was no jury of regular people. This time it was federal court. This time the stakes were prison. He tried to fight. He hired more lawyers. He spent more money, but the evidence was too strong. Leo's recording was played again. The forged documents were shown again. The bank records were spread out on a table like a map of his crimes. He was found guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison. 8 years. I sat in the courtroom when the sentence was read. Leo was next to me. We held hands. Richard was led away in handcuffs. Before they took him out, he looked at me. His eyes were wet. For a second, I thought he might say something, an apology, an explanation, something, but he just turned his head and walked away. Patricia divorced him 2 months later. She kept the house in Florida. She sent me a letter. She said she was sorry. She said she hoped we could forgive her for not seeing the truth sooner. I did not write back, not because I was angry, but because I did not know what to say. Forgiveness is complicated. It does not come in a neat package. Some days I think I forgive her. Some days I think I do not. Maybe both things are true at the same time. Leo and I bought back our father's garage. It had been sold years ago, turned into a pawn shop. The windows were dirty. The sign was broken. The inside smelled like old cigarettes and regret. We cleaned it for a month, scraped the old paint off the walls, replaced the floor, bought new tools, hung a new sign outside. Whitmore Auto, same letters, same colors, same promise. Leo runs it now. He is good with his hands, just like our father. Customers say he even laughs like him. A loud, rocky laugh that fills the whole room. I handle the books. I work from a small office in the back where I can hear the bell ring when a customer walks in. Sometimes I look at the calendar and realize it has been years since I thought about Richard. Other times I dream about him. In the dreams, I am 12 years old again, sitting on the porch, waiting for my father to come home. We bought the land back too, the 200 acres by the lake. We drove up there together, Leo and me, on a sunny day in May. The lake was blue and calm. The trees were green. There was an old barn on the property that had collapsed years ago. We walked the whole property. Took us 3 hours. We did not talk much, we just walked. At the edge of the lake, Leo stopped. He picked up a stone and skipped it across the water. It bounced 4 times before it sank. Dad taught me how to do that, he said. I know, I said. He taught me too. We sat on the shore for a while. The sun was warm on our faces. A bird flew overhead. The water lapped at the ground. What should we do with it? Leo asked. I do not know, I said. Sell it, keep it, build something. Leo thought for a minute. He said, maybe we build a place for kids like us. Kids who lost their parents. Kids who have nowhere to go. I looked at him. He had tears in his eyes. So did I? That is a good idea, Leo, I said. That is a really good idea. So that is what we are doing. It will take years. It will take money. It will take work. But we are not afraid of work. We are Whitmores. We are mechanics. We fix things that are broken. The house in Ohio is gone. We sold it after the trial. Too many memories, too many ghosts. But we bought a new house together, just outside of town. It has a porch. And on summer evenings, I sit on it and watch the sun go down. Sometimes I think about Richard, sitting in a prison cell somewhere. Counting the days, I do not feel happy about it. I do not feel sad either. I just feel still. Like the lake after the wind stops blowing. I visited him once. About a year after he was sent away. I do not know why I went. Maybe I needed to see him behind glass. Maybe I needed to see that he was small now, that he could not hurt us anymore. He sat down across from me. He looked older, thinner. His expensive suits were gone. He wore a gray prison uniform. His hands were pale. Maya, he said, I did not think you would come. I know, I said. We sat there for a minute. The room was cold. The guard stood by the door, pretending not to listen. Richard said, I am sorry. I looked at him. I said, are you sorry because you mean it? Or are you sorry because you got caught? He did not answer. That is what I thought, I said. I stood up to leave. Maya, he said. Wait, I waited. He said, your father, Sam, he was the better brother, he always was. I was jealous of him. I was jealous his whole life. He had a family that loved him. He had a daughter who looked at him like he was a hero. I never had that. So when he died, I took the land because I thought it would make me feel like him. Like I had something he had. I said, but it did not make you feel like him. Did it? No, he said. It made me feel worse. Then we have nothing else to say to each other, I said. I walked out. I did not look back. That was the last time I saw him. My father used to say, Maya, the world will try to make you small. Do not let it. He was right. The world tried. Richard tried. Grief tried. Poverty tried. The foster system tried. Donnie tried. But here I am, still standing. Still fighting. Still loving my brother. Still hearing my father's laugh in my dreams. The inheritance was stolen. But not the love. Never the love. Sometimes I take out my father's letter. The one he wrote before he died. The paper is soft now, worn from being folded and unfolded so many times. I read it on days when I feel sad. On days when I miss him so much it feels like a rock in my chest. Dear Maya and Leo, it says. If you are reading this, I am sorry I could not be there to say it in person, but I need you to know something. Years ago, before you were born, my father left me a piece of land up north, near the lake. It is not much to look at now, but it is the only thing of real value I own. One day, that land might save you. Do not let anyone take it from you, not family, not friends. It is yours, both of you. I love you more than all the stars. Dad, the land did save us, not because of its value, but because it gave us a reason to fight. It gave us a map back to each other. Leo and I are not the same people we would have been if my father had lived. We are harder, more careful, more suspicious of kindness, but we are also stronger. We know what loss feels like. We know what it feels like to have nothing. And because we know that, we know how to appreciate everything we have now. The garage is doing well. Leo has hired 2 young mechanics. He is teaching them the trade. He is patient with them in a way that no one was ever patient with him. He tells them stories about our father. He keeps a picture of Sam on the wall of the garage. Under the picture, it says, the founder, I am still doing the books, but I am also working on the plans for the land, the place for kids who have lost everything. I have met with architects. I have talked to lawyers. I have applied for grants. It is slow work, but I am patient. I learned patience in the years I spent waiting for justice. One day, children will run on that land. They will swim in that lake. They will sleep in safe beds. They will eat hot meals. They will have someone to tuck them in at night. They will know that they are not nobodies. They will know that someone fought for them. That is the real inheritance. Not the land, not the money, the fight. I am Maya Whitmore. I am 28 years old. I no longer live in the small house in Ohio. Leo and I live in a house with a porch and a garden and a dog named Sam. The dog is old and gray and sleeps most of the day. But when he dreams, his legs move like he is running. Like he is chasing something. Like he is finally free. Sometimes I sit on the porch and think about the night my father did not come home. I think about the phone call, the rain at the funeral, the smell of white lilies in the trash, the scissors under my pillow, the bus to Detroit, the diner where Leo ate 3 plates of pancakes. I think about Richard behind the glass, the gray uniform, the pale hands, the apology that was not really an apology. I think about my mother, her tired eyes, her rough hands, the tea I made her the night before she died, the way she smiled, the way she said thank you. I think about my father, his laugh, his messy handwriting, his love for us. His love that was so big it could not fit inside one house, one garage, one small Ohio town. His love that followed us into foster care, onto the streets, into the courtroom. His love that brought us home. The story does not end with revenge. It ends with something quieter, something harder to name. It ends with 2 siblings who lost everything and built something new. It ends with a garage that smells like grease and hope. It ends with a piece of land by a lake that will one day be filled with the sound of children laughing. That is the ending. That is the whole story. If you are listening this and you have lost someone, keep going. If you have been stolen from, keep fighting. If the world has tried to make you small, do not let it. You are not a nobody. You are a Whitmore, or whatever your name is. You are someone who survived. And surviving is the greatest revenge of all.